The sky over Zerthia Prime burned red with the fires of war. Hundreds of alien ships streaked across orbit, leaving trails of plasma like ribbons of anger. The once great Zerthian Empire, known across the galaxy for its unmatched fleet and ruthless efficiency, was crumbling. On the flagship Sovereign Wrath, Queen Lysara stood on the observation deck. Her many-eyed head tilted slightly, scanning the chaos below. The monitors around her flashed with updates. Dozens of colonies had fallen in the past few hours. Her fleets were being torn apart, and enemy warships had pierced the outer defenses. "Report," she demanded, her voice sharp, echoing across the sleek metallic chamber. A nervous officer approached, shaking his tentacle. "Your Majesty, we've lost 3 major sectors. The fleet, it's breaking. Many commanders have surrendered. Morale is low." Lysara's mandibles tightened. Surrender was a word she hated, a word she would never allow. Yet the truth stared her in the face. Her empire, built over centuries, was faltering. "We cannot fail," she hissed, her multicolored eyes scanning the starfield. "We must hold." "Give me a plan." The officer shuffled, clearly unsure. We can regroup at Sector 17. But the enemy, they adapt too quickly. Every counter we launch, they anticipate." Lysara slammed her claw on the console. Sparks flew and a siren blared. "Do you think I need excuses? I need solutions." In the crowded observation hall behind her, hundreds of alien officers and advisors whispered among themselves. Fear and confusion hung heavy in the air. The Queen's closest generals exchanged anxious glances. Some even began murmuring about retreat, a thought that would have earned them execution a week ago. Among the crowd, a small figure moved quietly, unnoticed. Jace, a human disguised in a bulky alien cloak, pressed himself against the wall. His heart pounded. He had never been on a battlefield like this. Humans were not meant to fight these massive interstellar wars. They were weak, fragile, easy prey. Yet here he was in the middle of a collapsing empire, watching the Queen who ruled it all. He had arrived days ago, a refugee fleeing a distant war that no one in this galaxy cared about. But curiosity had drawn him in. And now, witnessing the Empire's downfall, he saw something, an opportunity. Jace's sharp eyes scanned the battle reports. Most alien commanders relied on brute force and overwhelming numbers, but he noticed patterns, tiny mistakes repeated over and over. The enemy didn't attack randomly, they were predictable. And yet the Queen's fleet continued to follow rigid formations, exposing themselves to ambushes. He swallowed. No human had ever dared to step forward in such a place. Humans were despised here, seen as fragile, unpredictable creatures with no place in galactic strategy. But what if he could help? At that moment, alarms blared throughout the ship. The enemy had found a weak point and launched a concentrated strike at the flagship's shields. Explosions shook the deck. Panels cracked and sparks flew. Officers stumbled, shouting in panic. Lysara's eyes flared. "Seal all sections. Divert power to forward shields. Activate the defense drones." The commands were efficient, but the damage continued. Her fingers flew over the console. She could not afford mistakes. Every second counted. Jace stepped forward, his mind racing. He knew it was risky. One wrong move, and the aliens would recognize him as a human and remove him, permanently. But he couldn't just stand by. Taking a deep breath, he raised his voice. "Queen Lysara." A hush fell over the hall. All eyes turned toward him. Aliens froze, their mandibles twitching in confusion. One of the generals barked, "Who dares?" Jace ignored him. "Your formations are predictable. The enemy is exploiting your left flank. If you reroute the smaller strike teams and hit-and-run maneuvers, you can cut their supply lines and regain control." Whispers filled the hall. The Queen's many eyes narrowed, assessing the tiny human in front of her. "You, a human, dare advise me?" she asked, voice a mix of anger and curiosity. Jace's heart raced, but he held his ground. "Yes, Your Majesty. I have studied their movements. I can help you turn this battle." The room erupted. Generals shouted, some laughing, others glaring. "A human? In our war council? This is madness." Lysara raised a claw, silencing the hall. Her eyes locked on Jace's. There was something in his confidence, something different from the fear and hesitation around her. "Explain," she demanded, her tone sharp but not dismissive. Jace nodded, taking a step closer. "The enemy predicts your fleet's movements based on patterns. You send large groups to attack and they ambush you with smaller, faster ships. If we break the pattern, split the fleet into smaller squads, and strike unpredictably, we can force them to retreat or overextend. We hit their supply lines and vulnerable points. They can't adapt as fast as we can. The Queen leaned forward, eyes narrowing. She could feel the risk. Trusting a human in the middle of the war could be catastrophic, but she also knew her generals were panicking and their strategies had failed again and again. "Why should I believe you?" she asked, her voice cold. "Because I have nothing to lose, and your current plan is failing," Jace said simply. For a long moment, the Queen studied him. Then she nodded slightly, almost imperceptibly. "Very well. I will test your idea. If it fails, you die." "Understood," Jace said calmly. Orders were quickly relayed. Small strike teams were deployed as Jace instructed. The first hit-and-run maneuvers were chaotic at first, but soon, enemy ships were caught off guard. Supply lines were cut. The Queen's fleet began regaining some control. The generals were stunned. It's working," one muttered under his breath. Lysara's mandibles twitched with a mix of astonishment and approval. "Whoever this human is, they may have saved us." Jace stayed in the background, quietly observing the battle. For the first time, he felt a strange sense of pride. Not as a human, not as a refugee, but as someone who made a difference in a war no one expected him to understand. As the enemy retreated for the moment, Lysara turned to her officers. "Today we survive because of ingenuity. We will adapt. We will fight. And we will not fall." The crowd of aliens erupted in cautious cheers, hope rekindled in their hearts. And in that moment, Jace realized that even a single human standing alone in a crowd could change the course of history. Outside, the red sky of war burned fiercely. But inside the flagship, a new spark of hope had been lit, one that would challenge the galaxy's assumptions about humanity. The battle over Zerthia Prime had slowed, but the war was far from over. The Queen's fleet had regained some ground thanks to the daring hit-and-run tactics suggested by the mysterious human Jace. Yet the enemy remained formidable, and the Queen knew that victory would not come from small successes alone. In the command hub of the flagship Sovereign Wrath, Lysara paced back and forth. Her many eyes glimmered with a mixture of hope and calculation. The monitors displayed the aftermath of Jace's initial strategy. Enemy ships scattered. Supply lines disrupted, but still, dozens of sectors remained under attack. "Bring him here," Lysara ordered, her voice sharper than the edge of a plasma blade. A few minutes later, Jace was escorted into the command chamber. The human walked calmly, though his heart pounded like a war drum. He had expected alien suspicion, perhaps even hostility. But the Queen's tone left no room for argument. "You have proven yourself, in a small way," Lysara began. "But small victories do not win wars. I need more. Can you provide it?" Jace nodded. "Yes, Your Majesty. But I will need access to your fleet commanders and some of your tactical data." The Queen studied him for a moment. Most humans were either reckless or timid. This one seemed neither. "Very well. You may work with my elite squad commanders. But know this, one failure and your life ends. Do you understand?" "Yes, Your Majesty," Jace replied. The Queen gestured toward a holographic star map that hovered above the command table. Countless fleets blinked red and blue, moving across the map like chess pieces. Red ships were Zerthian, blue were enemy forces. Several sectors showed heavy blue concentrations. "Here," Lysara said, pointing with a sharp claw. "The eastern sectors. We have sent 3 divisions there, and all have been annihilated. The enemy anticipates every move. Explain how you would change this." Jace studied the map carefully. His human mind worked differently from the aliens. While they focused on overwhelming force and rigid formations, he thought in terms of flexibility, unpredictability, and morale. "The enemy has predictable routines," Jace said, pointing to the eastern sectors. "They expect you to attack in waves. If we deploy smaller independent squads that move unpredictably, we can lure them into traps. At the same time, we cut off reinforcements before they reach the front line. The enemy fights in a straight line, we fight in curves. Their strategy is rigid. Ours will be flexible." A general with 4 arms snorted. "Curves? Flexible? This is nonsense. Wars are won by strength, not by games." Lysara's gaze flicked to him. "You will listen," she commanded. The general fell silent. Jace continued. "We need to combine 3 things: speed, unpredictability, and precision. Smaller squads can strike targets of opportunity, retreat before the enemy responds, and regroup at hidden locations. We force them to stretch their lines, make mistakes, and leave gaps we can exploit. And if we train them to anticipate these gaps, our soldiers will become more effective than raw numbers. The Queen's many eyes narrowed thoughtfully. And you believe my commanders can understand this? They will, Jay said confidently. Once they see results. Lysara nodded slowly. Very well. We will test your plan in Sector 23. If it works, we implement it across all fronts. If it fails... She paused, letting the unspoken threat hang in the air. You will learn why humans are not supposed to meddle in Zerthian affairs. Jay swallowed, but he kept his calm. Understood. The preparation for Sector 23 began immediately. Jace worked alongside the Queen's elite commanders, explaining his ideas in simple terms. Many were skeptical at first, grumbling about trusting a human over centuries of Zerthian strategy. But Jace's confidence was infectious. He used examples from human conflicts, small, tactical maneuvers that turned the tide of battles against stronger foes. He showed them how to break formations, how to use smaller ships in independent squads, and how to exploit weak points in the enemy's supply lines. Slowly, the commanders began to see the logic. By the time the squads were ready, the fleet was buzzing with anticipation. For the first time, Zerthian soldiers felt a spark of hope. They were no longer just following orders. They were part of something unpredictable, something new. The battle began at dawn. Sector 23 stretched across a dense asteroid field, perfect for ambushes. Jace had chosen the location for its tactical advantages. Natural cover for small squads, choke points for enemy ships, and blind spots in the enemy's radar. The Queen watched from the flagship's observation deck, her gaze sharp. Remember, she murmured, do not fail. Jace's squads moved quickly, striking enemy supply lines first. The enemy was caught off guard, expecting a direct assault on their front lines. Explosions erupted in space as supply convoys were destroyed, forcing enemy fleets to scramble. Move to the next target. Jace's voice crackled through the comms. Hit, retreat, regroup. Keep them off balance. The enemy attempted to counterattack, but their rigid formations made them easy prey. Smaller Zerthian squads darted in and out, exploiting every weakness. Within hours, Sector 23 was under Zerthian control. The Queen allowed herself a brief smile. Perhaps this human is more than luck. Word of the success spread quickly through the fleet. Rumors began to circulate about a mysterious strategist, a human, who was turning the tide of the war. Some generals were reluctant to admit it, but soldiers whispered excitedly among themselves. The morale boost was immediate and powerful. Jace, however, remained cautious. He knew this was only the beginning. The enemy would adapt, and the Queen's trust in him had made him a target for jealous officers. He needed to stay ahead, always thinking several steps forward. In the days that followed, he worked tirelessly, studying enemy movements, training elite squads, and refining tactics. The Queen visited him frequently, observing his strategies firsthand. She was fascinated by the human's perspective, so different from centuries of Zerthian tradition. You see the battle differently, she admitted one evening. Where my generals see numbers, you see patterns. Where they see strength, you see opportunity. Perhaps this is why humans survive despite their fragility. Jay shrugged. Humans adapt, we learn. And we take risks others won't. The Queen's mandibles twitched in amusement. Adaptation and risk. Perhaps that is the lesson for my empire. As the Queen implemented more of Jace's strategies, the tide of war began to shift. Entire sectors were reclaimed. Enemy commanders, once confident, grew wary and defensive. Jace's predictions continued to prove correct. Small squads could strike deep, disrupt supply lines, and retreat without losses. The enemy was confused and frustrated, struggling to respond to a tactic they could not predict. The Queen's inner circle began to notice a change in morale. Soldiers moved with purpose, commanders coordinated with precision, and even the Queen herself felt a renewed sense of control. For the first time in months, victory seemed possible, but not everyone was pleased. Some of the older generals grumbled about trusting a human, fearing the loss of their own influence. Rumors of plotting began to circulate. Jace noticed subtle glances, whispered words, and tense exchanges. He knew that while the Queen trusted him, the jealousy of others could threaten everything he had achieved. Despite this, he pressed on. The next challenge was larger. A coordinated strike on multiple sectors simultaneously. It would test the limits of the Queen's fleet and Jace's human tactics. Failure could mean total annihilation. Success could mean the first real victory in the war. The day of the operation arrived. The Queen's fleet moved with careful precision, squads following Jace's guidance. The enemy, expecting conventional attacks, was caught off guard again. Strategic strikes dismantled defenses, supply lines collapsed, and key enemy positions fell one by one. Watching from the flagship, the Queen's many eyes gleamed with approval. This human, he may indeed have saved my empire. Jace, focused on the comms and holographic displays, barely noticed the praise. His mind was already calculating the next moves, predicting enemy reactions and preparing contingency plans. He had learned one thing in his life. In war, nothing is guaranteed, and success is only temporary if you stop thinking ahead. As the sun set over Zerthia Prime, the fleet regrouped. Victory, small but significant, had been achieved. The human had proven himself not by strength but by courage, intelligence, and the willingness to challenge assumptions. For Queen Lysera, the lesson was clear. Perhaps the survival of her empire did not depend solely on Zerthian might. Perhaps it depended on seeing value in the unexpected, and trusting someone who, by all appearances, should not have mattered. And for Jace, the human in the crowd, the realization was just as profound. One person, even a single human, could change the course of an empire. The war was far from over, but hope had returned. And with it, the possibility that humans, underestimated and overlooked, could shape the fate of the galaxy. The Zerthian Empire had not felt hope in decades, not since the enemy fleets began their relentless campaign. Yet under the Queen's command and guided by the human strategist Jace, the tide of war was beginning to shift. From the flagship Sovereign Wrath, Queen Lysera watched as her fleets advanced through contested space. Sector after sector, the enemy was retreating or being forced into disarray. The smaller, flexible squads that Jace had introduced darted through asteroid fields, ambushed supply lines, and struck with deadly precision. In the command chamber, Jace crouched over a holographic map, plotting the next phase of operations. He spoke in calm, measured tones, issuing orders to multiple sectors at once. Though small in stature, his presence commanded attention. The Zerthian officers, initially skeptical, now moved with purpose, executing his strategies without hesitation. "Your Majesty," one general said, bowing his head slightly, "Sector 45 has fallen. The enemy is retreating into the nebula cluster. They are scattered." Lysera's multifaceted eyes glimmered with cautious satisfaction. "Good, prepare to press the advantage. We will strike while they are disoriented." Jace raised a hand. "With respect, Your Majesty, if we push too hard now, we risk falling into a trap. The enemy is clever. They may feign retreat to lure us in." Lysera considered his words. Few could match her in intelligence and strategy, and yet this human, this fragile creature, consistently saw angles others missed. She nodded. "Then tell me, Jace, what do you suggest?" "We divide the fleet," he said. "Two main groups engage directly to hold the enemy's attention. Meanwhile, smaller independent squads will move through the nebula, cutting off reinforcements and supply lines. We force them to fight on our terms, not theirs." Lysera's mandibles twitched in thought. "And you believe this will work?" "It has to," Jace said simply. "Anything less will leave the battle undecided, and undecided battles favor the stronger side. Right now we are stronger, not in numbers, but in adaptability. If we act quickly, we can turn the war around completely." The Queen studied him for a long moment. Then, with a decisive motion, she raised her claw. "Make it so." The operation began at dawn. Jace's strategy relied on speed, flexibility, and precise coordination. Squads moved through asteroid belts and nebula clouds, striking enemy positions unexpectedly. The enemy, accustomed to rigid patterns of attack, could not respond in time. In Sector 52, a squad led by Jace's human-inspired tactics intercepted a convoy carrying energy supplies. The enemy attempted to fight back with overwhelming firepower, but the squad split into smaller groups, flanking the convoy from multiple angles. In less than an hour, the convoy was destroyed and the enemy ships were forced to retreat, their formation in chaos. Back on the flagship, the Queen monitored the battle. She had begun to notice something remarkable. Her soldiers, once hesitant and fearful, were now taking initiative. They were learning from Jace's methods, adapting quickly, and even suggesting minor adjustments. The human had not just changed the fleet's tactics, he had changed its spirit. "Look at them," she whispered to one of her advisors. "They are moving with purpose. They have hope again." The advisor nodded. "It is unusual. Morale has improved more than any of our victories in decades." Jace's influence extended beyond the battlefield. As the news of victories spread, sectors previously on the brink of surrender began to rally. Planets that had lost faith in the Zerthian Empire now sent reinforcements, inspired by the unexpected success. Yet not all were pleased. Some of the older generals, resentful of a human's growing influence, whispered among themselves. Their jealousy simmered, hidden beneath formal compliance. Jace noticed the subtle glances, the hushed murmurs, and he knew that suspicion and envy were as dangerous as enemy fire. The next challenge came in the form of a heavily fortified enemy station near the outer rim. Conventional wisdom dictated a direct assault, but Jace had other ideas. "We cannot win by strength alone," he explained to the Queen and her council. "The station is designed to repel large fleets. If we hit it head-on, we lose thousands. But there is a flaw in their design, a hidden power relay at the base of the station. If we disable it, the station's defenses will fail." Lysara's mandibles twitched in surprise. "You would send a small team to infiltrate it?" "Against an entire garrison?" "Yes," Jace said. "A small team can move quickly unseen. They strike the relay, retreat, and we follow up with a coordinated attack. The enemy will be vulnerable for a very short window." "Timing is everything." The Queen considered the risk. Sending a small force was dangerous, but Jace's previous successes had earned her trust. "Very well. Prepare your team." The operation was executed flawlessly. Using stealth and careful planning, the elite squads infiltrated the enemy station, destroyed the relay, and withdrew without detection. Moments later, the Zerthian fleet struck, overwhelming the station's weakened defenses. Victory was swift and decisive. The Queen allowed herself a rare smile. This human continues to surprise me." As the war continued, Jace's tactics became standard practice throughout the fleet. The Queen's forces, once hesitant and demoralized, moved with confidence and precision. Enemy attacks were anticipated, traps were avoided, and victories accumulated. For the first time in years, the Zerthian Empire felt unstoppable, not because of raw power, but because of ingenuity, adaptability, and courage. Jace remained humble, always in the background, constantly analyzing the next move. He trained officers to think creatively, to anticipate the enemy, and to value initiative over blind obedience. His methods challenged centuries of Zerthian tradition, but they worked. In quiet moments, the Queen observed him, fascinated by the human's ability to remain calm under pressure. "Your species is fragile, yet you seem to thrive in danger," she remarked. Jace shrugged. "We survive by thinking, learning, and taking risks. That is how humans endure." The Queen considered this. Perhaps there was much her empire could learn from humanity. Beyond mere tactics, perhaps survival depended not just on strength, but on adaptability and courage, qualities humans displayed in abundance. The turning point came during a massive battle in the Arcanus cluster. The enemy had amassed a fleet twice the size of the Queen's forces, confident in their superior numbers. Jace analyzed the situation and devised a daring plan. "We cannot confront them directly," he told the Queen, "but we can use the terrain to our advantage. Nebula clouds, asteroid fields, and gravitational anomalies. If we maneuver carefully, we can neutralize their numerical advantage." The Queen raised an eyebrow. "You propose we fight a fleet twice our size?" "Indirectly?" "Yes," Jace said. "We strike where they least expect it, divide their forces, and force them into choke points. Their numbers will mean nothing if they cannot maneuver freely." Lysara considered his words, then nodded. "Very well. Make it so." The battle began with deceptive calm. Zerthian squads moved in precise formations, seemingly retreating, luring enemy ships into traps. Suddenly, hidden strike teams emerged from asteroid fields, hitting enemy flanks with devastating effect. Supply lines were cut, command ships disabled, and confusion spread through the enemy ranks. By the end of the day, the enemy fleet was in full retreat. The Queen's forces, against all odds, had turned a desperate battle into a resounding victory. In the aftermath, Lysara called Jace to her side. "You have changed the course of this war," she said, her voice heavy with respect. "I underestimated humans. You have proven that courage, Intelligence and adaptability are as powerful as any fleet. Jace shook his head. It is not me alone, Your Majesty. Your soldiers followed the plan. They adapted. They fought with courage. I only guided them. The Queen smiled, rare and genuine. Guided or not, you are a force unlike any I have seen. The galaxy will remember this human. As the Zerthian Empire consolidated its regained territory, Jace continued to work tirelessly. The tide of war had shifted, and for the first time in decades, the Queen and her people felt confident that victory was possible. Yet shadows lingered. Some generals still harbored jealousy and resentment. The enemy, though weakened, would adapt and strike back. Jace knew the war was far from over, and every victory brought new challenges. Still, for now, hope burned brightly across the Empire. One human standing alone in a crowd had sparked a revolution in strategy and spirit. And as the Queen looked out over the recovering fleet, she understood something fundamental. The survival of her empire, and perhaps the galaxy itself, depended on the unexpected courage and brilliance of humanity. The Zerthian Empire was on the rise. Sector by sector, the enemy had been pushed back, their forces scattered and demoralized. Queen Lysara's fleet moved with confidence, guided by the human strategist, Jace. Yet victory often breeds envy, and where there is envy, betrayal soon follows. On the flagship Sovereign Wrath, the Queen held a council of her top generals. The room was vast, with hollow screens displaying maps of contested space. Jace stood beside her, quietly observing, a calm figure amid the tension. Sector 68 reports that enemy scouts are regrouping, one general said, his tone sharp. We must strike again or risk losing the advantage. Agreed, Lysara replied. Prepare to deploy the squads I ordered. Jace, I will need your guidance. Jace studied the holographic map.
His human mind analyzed every possibility, anticipating enemy movements and vulnerabilities.
The enemy will try to anticipate a direct assault, he explained. We will use deception. Some of our fleets will appear to retreat, luring them into the asteroid belts. Others will strike at their command points and supply lines. Timing will be critical. The Queen nodded. Very well, execute. As the plans were discussed, Jace noticed something troubling. Certain generals avoided eye contact, whispering to one another. Their gestures were subtle, but he knew them well enough to recognize the signs of discontent. Some of these officers had been resentful since he had first suggested strategies, viewing a human's input as a threat to their authority. He quietly leaned toward the Queen. Your Majesty, there is dissent among some generals. I recommend caution. Not all your fleet may follow orders as intended. Lysara's eyes narrowed. I suspected as much. Do you know who? Several of the older commanders, Jace said. They resent the influence of a human, and they may take action against us if given the chance. The Queen's mandibles twitched. Then we must be vigilant. We cannot afford internal sabotage. That night, as the fleet moved through the darkness of space, Jace reviewed every communication channel. His instincts were correct. Whispers of mutiny and subtle acts of sabotage were detected. A relay temporarily disabled, false reports of enemy movements, and orders delayed. The human strategist knew the risk. If the Queen's fleet was compromised from within, the enemy could exploit it, potentially annihilating the forces that had just begun to reclaim the Empire. Your Majesty, Jace said, approaching her quarters, we have a threat from within. Some generals are planning to interfere with our operations. We must act before they can betray us openly. Lysara's eyes glimmered with resolve. Bring them to me. In a private chamber, the Queen summoned the suspected officers. Their faces showed forced calm, but Jace could see the tension beneath the surface. The Queen's voice was cold and sharp. You have been plotting against this fleet, she said. Against me. Against the survival of the Zerthian Empire. Speak now and face judgment. The generals hesitated, exchanging glances. One finally spoke. Your Majesty, we only wish to protect the Empire, a human guiding our strategy. It is dangerous. Lysara's mandibles twitched in anger. Dangerous? He has saved us repeatedly. While your rigid strategies would have lost the war, your jealousy does not protect the Empire, it endangers it. Jace stepped forward, calm but commanding. Your plans are failing. You resist change because it threatens your pride. The Queen's trust is in me because I provide results, not excuses. If you wish to serve the Empire, follow orders. If not, you will be removed. The generals paled. The queen had never publicly trusted a human, and now here he stood, guiding her judgment. One by one they bowed, forced to acknowledge their failure. "Good," Lysara said. "You will follow our plan to the letter. Any deviation will be met with immediate action. Do you understand?" "Yes, Your Majesty," they replied, though unease lingered. With the threat of internal betrayal contained, Jace turned his focus to the ongoing war. The next major operation targeted the enemy's command hub, a massive station deep within the Arcanis Nebula. Destroying it could cripple the enemy's coordination and possibly end the war. "This will be the most difficult operation yet," Jace told the Queen. "The enemy will anticipate a direct assault. We must strike indirectly with multiple squads performing coordinated attacks simultaneously." Lysara nodded. "We will trust your plan." The fleet moved into position. Squads darted through asteroid fields, weaving between debris and gravitational anomalies. Enemy sensors struggled to track their movements. Meanwhile, Jace monitored every squad, giving real-time instructions to ensure synchronization. At the same time, the Queen's flagship moved boldly toward the command hub, drawing enemy attention. The enemy commander took the bait, focusing fire on the flagship and leaving the station vulnerable. "Now," Jace commanded. Elite squads struck from unexpected angles. Explosions rocked the station, disabling its defenses. The enemy, caught off guard by the coordinated attack, scrambled to respond. Supply lines were severed, command structures collapsed, and chaos spread throughout the hub. Back on the flagship, Lysara watched the enemy fleet falter. "Remarkable," she whispered. "Your strategy is flawless." Jace shook his head. "It is only effective because your soldiers executed it well. They followed orders, adapted, and acted with courage. I only guided them. Victory came swiftly. The enemy command hub was destroyed, their fleet in disarray. Across the galaxy, Zerthian soldiers cheered, morale soaring to heights unseen for decades. But even in victory, caution remained. Jace knew the enemy would adapt, and internal threats were not entirely eliminated. Some generals continued to resent his presence, quietly waiting for an opportunity to undermine him. Yet the Queen's trust in him had become unshakable. She publicly acknowledged his contributions for the first time, praising him before the entire fleet. "Today, we witness the courage and wisdom of a human," she declared. "He has guided our fleet, saved countless lives, and turned the tide of this war. Let all Zerthians remember that greatness can come from unexpected places." The soldiers erupted in cheers, and even the previously skeptical generals had no choice but to acknowledge Jace's achievements. As the fleet celebrated, Jace reflected on the events of the past weeks. A single human standing in a crowd had influenced an entire empire. He had guided strategies, saved lives, and earned the respect of the Queen herself. Yet he knew the war was far from over. The enemy would regroup, adapt, and return with new tactics. And among the Zerthians, jealousy and fear still lingered. One wrong move, one miscalculation, and all they had achieved could be undone. Still, Jace remained determined. Humanity had been underestimated for too long, and now he realized it was his opportunity to prove that courage, intelligence, and adaptability could change the fate of an empire, and perhaps the galaxy itself. As the celebration continued, Lysara approached him quietly. "Jace," she said, her voice soft but firm, "you have not only saved my empire, but you have shown me the value of looking beyond tradition. Perhaps we have much to learn from humans." Jace smiled faintly. "We survive by thinking differently, adapting and taking risks. That is how humans endure." The Queen nodded. "Then perhaps it is time for my empire to embrace those lessons. And perhaps it is time to see you not as a human in the crowd, but as an ally and a strategist worthy of my trust." Jace bowed slightly. "I will continue to serve your Majesty, to protect your people and ensure that the Zerthian Empire survives." Lysara's eyes glimmered with approval. "Good. Then we move forward together." As the flagship sailed through the stars, the war that once seemed unwinnable now had a chance at a decisive victory. And at the heart of this change, a human strategist once unnoticed in a crowd stood at the center of an empire's future. The tides of war were turning, but the greatest challenges still lay ahead. The enemy would not surrender easily, and internal threats had not been entirely eradicated. Yet hope, long absent from the hearts of the Zerthian people, now burned brighter than ever. The final battle loomed over the horizon of the Andaris expanse. For months, the Zerthian Empire, guided by the human strategist Jace, had been regaining territory and momentum. Entire enemy fleets had been routed, supply lines disrupted, and key command hubs destroyed. But the enemy's core forces remained intact, hidden in the far reaches of the expanse, biding their time for a final, desperate strike. Queen Lysara's flagship, Sovereign Wrath, led the combined fleet of Zerthian warships toward the enemy's stronghold. The vastness of space stretched before them, stars glittering coldly as if witnessing the tension about to erupt. Jace stood in the command chamber, scanning the holographic map. He had analyzed countless scenarios, calculated every possible move, and prepared contingencies for every eventuality. The enemy would attack directly, trying to overwhelm their fleet, but Jace had a plan to counter it. "Your Majesty," Jace said, turning to the Queen, "this will be the most decisive battle yet. The enemy will expect a head-on confrontation, but we will not give it to them. We will split our forces. While the main fleet engages, smaller squads will infiltrate from the flanks, targeting command ships and communication arrays. If we succeed, the enemy will crumble within hours." Lysara's many eyes gleamed with determination. "Then we fight together, human. Lead us to victory." Jace nodded, a sense of quiet resolve in his posture. "We win together, Your Majesty. No one fights alone." The battle began with a deafening roar of plasma and energy cannons. Enemy warships surged forward, confident in their superior numbers. They expected chaos to spread across the Zerthian fleet, but the Zerthians, under Jace's guidance, were anything but chaotic. Small squads darted through asteroid fields, weaving unpredictably, striking enemy flanks and disappearing before retaliation could arrive. Supply convoys were destroyed, cutting off reinforcements. Command ships were isolated and forced into vulnerable positions. From the observation deck, the Queen watched the battle unfold. Her fleet moved with precision, executing maneuvers that had seemed impossible just months ago. Each success, each calculated strike bore Jace's unmistakable influence. "This is remarkable," she whispered to an advisor. "Our soldiers fight with courage and intelligence. It is as if a new spirit has entered the fleet." Jace monitored the comms, coordinating squads across multiple sectors simultaneously. "Focus on the enemy command hub," he instructed. "Once it falls, their coordination will collapse. We must act quickly before they adapt." Meanwhile, within the enemy stronghold, confusion reigned. Commanders struggled to respond to the unexpected attacks. Fleets were scattered, supply lines severed, and communication disrupted. The enemy had faced flexible tactics before, but never with such precision and timing. Jace's squad struck simultaneously from multiple directions, cutting off escape routes and isolating key enemy vessels. Explosions lit the void of space as ships were disabled or destroyed. The enemy, once confident, began to panic. Back on the flagship, Lysara turned to Jace. "Your plan? It is flawless." Jace shook his head slightly. "It works because of your soldiers' courage. They trust the plan and act decisively. I guide, but they execute." Lysara's mandibles twitched in approval. "Then we shall show the galaxy what happens when courage and ingenuity guide strength." As the battle reached its peak, Jace noticed a critical opportunity. The enemy's main command vessel was exposed, isolated from its fleet. He quickly devised a maneuver. A coordinated strike by the elite squads combined with a feint by the main fleet to draw attention away. "All units, execute the final assault," Jace commanded. "Target the command ship directly. Timing is everything." Squads moved like shadows, weaving through debris and firing with precision. Energy blasts tore through the enemy hull. The main fleet drew the remaining ships into traps, leaving the command vessel vulnerable. Within moments, the enemy flagship exploded in a massive flash, sending shockwaves through the battlefield. The enemy fleet, leaderless and demoralized, began a full retreat. Zerthian forces pursued only briefly, letting the survivors flee to avoid unnecessary losses. The battle was won. Across the fleet, soldiers erupted in cheers. For the first time in decades, the Zerthian Empire had achieved a victory so complete that even their oldest generals could not deny its magnitude. The tide of war had finally turned, and the galaxy began to take notice. Lysara called for a fleet-wide broadcast. Her voice, amplified across ships and planets, echoed with authority and triumph. "Today, the Zerthian Empire has demonstrated that courage, intelligence, and unity can overcome any threat. Today we have reclaimed our honor and secured our future." She paused, her gaze shifting to Jace. And today we honor one among us who proved that greatness is not limited by species. One human standing in a crowd guided us to victory. Let all Zerthians remember that courage can come from the most unexpected places. Jace, standing beside her, felt a mixture of pride and humility. For so long, humans had been underestimated in the galaxy. Now they had earned recognition not just for strength but for ingenuity and resolve. In the days following the battle, the Empire began rebuilding. Planets once threatened by the enemy sent delegations of thanks and support. Zerthian soldiers trained under Jace's guidance, learning new tactics that emphasized flexibility, adaptation, and cooperation. Some of the older generals, initially skeptical or resentful, were forced to acknowledge the value of his human insight. Even they could not deny that the war had been won because of courage and intelligence, not brute force alone. Jace remained modest. He trained officers, planned defenses, and prepared for any lingering threats. His human perspective had changed the Empire, but he knew vigilance was necessary. The galaxy was vast, and enemies were never fully gone. The Queen invited Jace to the throne room, where ambassadors and leaders of the fleet gathered to honor the victory. She stood proudly, her many eyes glimmering. Today we celebrate not only the survival of the Zerthian Empire, but also the extraordinary contributions of a human among us, she declared. Jace has shown that courage, intelligence, and determination can change the fate of an empire. Let his example inspire us all. The crowd erupted in applause. Even the skeptics could not deny the truth. A human had played a pivotal role in saving an empire, guiding strategies and inspiring soldiers. Jace stepped forward, bowing slightly. I did not act alone, he said. Your soldiers fought bravely, your people supported the effort, and the Queen trusted me. Together we achieved this victory. Lysara nodded. Then let this victory mark a new era for the Zerthian Empire, a time when strength is combined with ingenuity, and courage is valued in all forms. Word of the human strategist spread across the galaxy. Tales of a single human influencing the course of a vast alien empire traveled through star systems. Other species, long dismissive of humanity, began to reconsider their assumptions. Humans, once considered weak and insignificant, had proven themselves capable of shaping galactic history. Jace's life changed forever. He was offered a permanent position as chief strategist for the Zerthian Empire, an honor unprecedented for a human. He accepted, not for glory, but to ensure that the Empire remained strong and prepared for any future threats. The Queen, once hesitant and proud, had learned an invaluable lesson. Greatness is not limited by species, and the courage to stand up even from the shadows can change the fate of worlds. Months later, as peace settled across reclaimed sectors, Jace stood on the observation deck of Sovereign Wrath, looking out at the stars. He reflected on the journey, from a human in the crowd unnoticed and underestimated to a strategist who had helped save an empire. Lysara joined him silently. You have done more than save my empire, she said. You have changed the way we think, the way we fight, and the way we see humanity. Jace smiled faintly. I only stood up when it mattered. That is all any of us can do. The Queen's eyes gleamed with admiration. Then stand beside me, human. Together we will face whatever the galaxy sends our way. Jace nodded, feeling a sense of belonging and purpose. Humanity, once underestimated and overlooked, had earned its place in the stars. And as the flagship sailed through the galaxy, the Zerthian Empire, reborn through courage, intelligence, and trust, stood ready to face the future. For the first time, the galaxy knew that humans were not weak, not insignificant, and not to be underestimated. One human in a crowd had changed history, and countless more would follow, inspired by the courage to stand, the intelligence to act, and the heart to persevere. The war was over. The Empire was safe, and humanity had earned respect among the stars.